Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, against the background of continued threats from David Frost to suspend the Northern Ireland Protocol, the EU Commission have pointed out that this would lead to legal action and, of more consequence, potentially to tariffs being raised on UK goods. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, because I've already explained how Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol does not, despite what a lot of people seem to think, allow the UK government to suspend the protocol, I've done that quite recently. I'm not going to recap that. I'll put a link in the description below, if I remember, for those interested in further context. What I want to cover here are the various pressures for and against the government even trying to pull this stunt, and what the EU Commission are threatening in retaliation, as well as what they would legally be able to do. So, as you can imagine, the situation can get quite messy. So first of all, those pressures on the UK government to suspend the protocol. So in favour of suspending it, we have the following. First, unionists in Northern Ireland want it suspended. Certainly the most prominent unionists at the moment, particularly in the DUP. Not only don't they care about the consequences of doing so, they actually look forward to some of them. That being said, the consequences of it are not necessarily what they think the consequences can be. Remember, they still think Brexit will give them that hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now, although unionists don't hold any real influence in the Conservative leadership these days, they are nonetheless ideologically matched in many ways. Basically, Northern Irish unionists have kindred spirits within the wider ranks of the Conservative Party. Secondly, the hardliners within the Parliamentary Conservative Party want the protocol suspended as well. In fact, they want it completely abolished. I have no reason to believe that many of them care about the legal or economic consequences either. After all, they knew that Brexit would pretty much devastate the country legally, economically, socially, even if engaged in good faith. As long as they don't suffer political consequences themselves, they're good. And even then, I think some of them don't care about that. They mostly cared about the money that it's made them. And for some of them, well, they've already done that and may not be bothered what happens now. David Frost is known to want to ingratiate himself with the hardliners in the party, potentially in the belief that if Boris Johnson goes, these people will still be in control of whoever succeeds him. You know, he is thinking of his future paychecks here. It's certainly believed that David Frost actually wants to suspend the protocol for whatever reason. Third, it would provide a good distraction from the Brexit shortages sweeping Britain right now. When your government is making a total shambles of things, and the newspaper headlines are pointing this out, focus people's attention on the imaginary invaders at the gates. But in terms of pressures against it, first of all, there's no legal basis for suspending the protocol at all. And if you do something that is unlawful, there is a risk that a court will tell you you can't do that. And I'm not talking about an international court, but a British court. Again, not going to go over all the ground I covered recently, but despite what the media say, if you actually read Article 16 of the protocol, which isn't long, you would see that its purpose is not to suspend anything. Secondly, and much more importantly, is the position of the United States. And I say this is more important than the law, because the government breaks the law all the time without serious consequence. But annoying America has ramifications. Johnson has been told this last week in no uncertain terms by both Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill, as well as the current occupant of the White House. The Northern Ireland Protocol is an essential element of preserving peace in Ireland. I cannot believe that Boris Johnson will not have been given private assurances that he will not be suspending the protocol, to Biden at least. Not that they will trust him, which is why they've also been saying things publicly. But although Brexit is costing us our fireworks this November, America will give us some if we abandon this particularly sensitive treaty. Third, the EU can trigger tariffs on UK goods, sparking a trade war. And this is a trade war we will lose badly. And let me explain why. And don't bother with any of this jingoistic nonsense about, oh yeah, they need us more than we need them. Haven't we already sunk that argument? It's not the obvious reason either. You know, I could say, well, they have a way larger market than we do. You cannot win a trade war in those circumstances. And I'm not even going to argue that it's because we're not even applying checks on EU imports. So the idea that we could engage in a trade war with a market where we're not even having import checks on their goods is laughable. And both of those are true and would put us in a very bad position from the start if we tried to engage in a trade war. But as I've said in the past, the EU are really clever and very well set up for trade wars. See, the way they operate is, with some countries, what they'll do is they'll just put tariffs on something particularly sensitive. The EU don't do that. What they do is they target. So they will put tariffs up on goods produced in the constituency of influential conservatives. They did this in the US when Trump tried to start a trade war recently. They put tariffs on Harley-Davidson motorbikes. Not because they're an important export for the US widely, but because it hurt a senior Republican. You know, back in George W. Bush's days, you know, they put tariffs on things that harmed his family. You know, they're very clever at targeting exports. So the idea is, so if they target exports in some influential conservatives constituency, then that business will be banging on the doors of that MP. That MP will be forced to bang on the door of Boris Johnson. You know, and the thing is, you can't even retaliate. You can't even do the same thing back to them. It's not possible to target tariffs on EU exports that hurt influential members. Because apart from anything else, power is shared much more widely than in an individual country. It's like, well, who do you target? Who are the 4 or 5 influential members of the EU that can target? There aren't any. You can't target tariffs on EU goods that particularly hurt the 3 or 4 people who get to decide these things. Because there aren't 3 or 4 people who decide these things. There's loads. There are too many people holding the levers of power in the EU that you can't single even a small number out as having an overwhelming amount of influence. 3 ways in which we are just in no shape to take the EU on in a trade war. And the tariffs would also be perfectly legal, because that's the thing. It would be perfectly legal. The Northern Ireland Protocol does not allow for the unilateral suspension of the protocol. But the Trade and Cooperation Agreement does allow for the unilateral imposition of remedies, including tariffs, should there be a divergence between the two. Well, dropping the protocol would create a sudden overnight divergence of standards on goods being able to pass into the EU single market. That would give them full legal authority to trigger tariffs in order to compensate. Now, that doesn't mean it would be easy. There are a couple of things that make this tricky for the EU and something to try and avoid, of course. The first is it would end up raising tensions to fever pitch against a UK government that would rather torch their entire country than be seen to back down. The EU have often been too soft on Johnson, in my view, because they realise that he has to sell every move as a Brexit win for him. He simply cannot hold on to power if he concedes anything, so they try very hard to be in a position so that he isn't seen to be conceding anything. And a trade war only ends when one side backs down. The second reason is that it could be fairly complex working out just how much compensation is required. Like, the tariffs are supposed to be proportionate to the risk to the single market. It's not just that they can just slap tariffs on whatever, well, they can do it on whatever they want, but to the right value. So I'm not sure how easy it would be to judge that risk and come up with those targeted tariffs that you could claim balance it out without going too far. And when I talked about the huge numbers of people on the levers of power in the EU being an advantage, when it comes to resisting undue influence from outside, it does have its downside. When you don't have a small number of people deciding things, it can make you very resistant to corruption and outside pressure. Brilliant. But it also makes decision making slower, more difficult in high pressure situations like this. Committees by their nature are very good at coming up with considered decisions, but very bad at coming up with quick decisions in a crisis. It's a bit like the 2 parts of our brain. We've got a dumb part of our brain that's very quick at making decisions. That's the part of our brain that deals with an urgent crisis, like a mugger jumping out at us. The other part of our brain is much better at making decisions, but it takes a long old time to do it. Still, you would feel that if the protocol were to be suspended, the EU would have to do something, and quickly. Part of me thinks, well, it wouldn't have to be immediate. I mean, wouldn't they give the UK government a week to reconsider? Look, this is stupid, you're messing about. But they'll judge the risk to the single market of a week or 2 of this to be low, and they'll go, look, we're going to give you a week to rethink it, and then we're going to do all these things. But they know that Johnson wouldn't do that. It would be humiliating and surely cost him his job. And also, anti-EU rhetoric would be sky high amongst Conservatives, and Johnson wouldn't be allowed to back down. So after a period of reflection, the EU would have to act anyway. I saw a report that the Commission are working on the assumption that we are going to suspend the protocol at some point. They're working on proposals designed to alleviate the issues that the UK government seems to think exist. But I think, hopefully, I haven't seen them explicitly state this, but they must know by now it really doesn't matter how effectively they calm down the situation. The government will always have some issue because they want the protocol dropped. Ideologically, not for practical reasons, just ideological. But also, they are working on their response should the protocol be abandoned by London. And I guess one argument against the EU even giving us a week to reconsider is that all hell would break loose in Northern Irish politics. The DUP would be cock-a-hoop, but Sinn Féin would be furious. Now, I can imagine cooler heads in between the two would be rather nervous about the immediate future. Now, there's no suggestion that any suspension is imminent. There was a meeting, for example, of the Specialised Committee a couple of days ago, and it's believed that there'll be intensive talks over the next few weeks as well. So this is not something that's going to happen this month. But it could be looking like towards the end of October, if the EU are correct and David Frost desperately wants to suspend the protocol and he just wants to make sure he's in the best possible position to get away with it, then someone may do something reckless. Because the thing is, right now, the UK position is, yes, we agreed that treaty, but what we'd like you to do with it now is to set fire to it and then piss on the ashes. Whereas the EU position is, well, do you know what? We like this treaty. We'd quite like to frame it and hang it on the wall. Now, the two positions are mutually exclusive. One side is going to have to fundamentally change before this issue is resolved in however many years that takes. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.